Hi, everybody. I am just getting started here. I'm going to need a little bit more help. Just tell me how long the session is, and let me make sure I can share my screen.
$45 Sir Frederick.
25 minutes. Okay.
Sorry, it's 45, sir.
45 minutes.
Yes, sir, including Q&A.
Okay, that's much better. All right. Can you hear me? Can you see the screen? Is everything looking good?
Yes, sir. It's loud and clear.
All right. So I'm going to ask a few questions in the chat to get started. How many people here have used BigBlueButton already within Moodle? If you have, please just put a name in the chat. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you what I actually had broadcasted very recently. We just finished doing a course with Moodle Academy on how to deliver effective virtual classrooms using BigBlueButton. But a lot of the course was on the theory and pedagogy around what makes an effective virtual classroom. And of course, we'll show you how you can do that with BigBlueButton. I will happily answer questions in the chat. If there is somebody, I will try to monitor it, but if I can't get to your question, don't worry, I'll get to it at the end. All right, so as I mentioned, I was introduction, I'm the product manager for BigBlueButton, and I also moonlight as the CEO of Blindside Networks, one of the commercial companies behind BigBlueButton. We, as Blindside Networks, manage each of the releases, and we work really hard to make sure it's the highest quality software possible. So just to put a distinction between the two companies, BigBlueButton is an open source virtual classroom. We say build for teachers and by teachers. And Blindside Networks, we started the BigBlueButton project in 2008, so we open sourced the code. And we have done quite a bit of hosting around the world. So in the last 2 years, we've hosted more than 2 billion minutes of virtual classes in BigBlueButton for more than 1 million educators. That's just us. There are many other people who have hosted BigBlueButton servers, which I'll talk about at the end. And I think they may have hosted more than we have. All right, so what is the mission of BigBlueButton? BigBlueButton, our mission is to build the next generation of virtual classrooms. And we emphasize virtual classrooms. We are not building a video conferencing system. For many of you that taught during the pandemic, you might have used a video conferencing system, and you might have found the experience to be less than satisfactory. The reason is that while video is an important aspect of teaching, it is not all the aspect of teaching. Video is only a small subset. You have so much more requirements that you need for an effective virtual classroom, which I will go through here. And if you don't have those, then all of the responsibility is on the teacher. So if you were, as a teacher, felt overwhelmed by trying to teach students online, to engage with them, to do formative assessment, it was because video itself is not sufficient. So what is the impact globally of education? It is huge. The UNESCO has 17 sustainability development goals. Number four is education. In fact, education underpins many of the other sustainability development goals. Think about the importance of having every student in the world have access to a high quality online learning experience. Or think about the potential of every teacher can look at the world as their classroom. If you think about how you would teach online today, I think you would agree that the current means for teaching online is not the end result, the end point of what we can achieve. There is more that can be done and more that should be done to help teachers engage students for learning. And that's the mission of the BigBlueButton project. But we just don't develop features. We think about things in a very specific way, which I want to talk about next. So we want to transform lives. So the why of what we do, like why do we exist, is to transform lives by improving education for everyone. And yes, the entire world. As an open source project, we are currently localized into 55 languages. If we're going to achieve our mission, we have to do it through, we believe the best way to do it is through open source. Just as Moodle is now the world's most dominant LMS, they did it because they gave Moodle to the world, and they built a business around providing support, services, and a network of companies around the world. We gave BigBlueButton to the world as well. We think we can do the same thing for virtual classes. So how to do this, how to achieve our mission? Well, of course, it's by BigBlueButton. open source, and we say it's built by teachers for teachers. And that means the design of BigBlueButton is guided by the goals of teachers and students. So a place to start then is to look at what those goals are. And we're going to define them in terms of 4 categories. So if you think of a successful virtual classroom, an effective one, it actually has 4 dimensions: management, relationship, engagement, and assessment. And if you excel in all of those, you will have a class that's going to be effective. So I want to look at this really closely from the point of view of a teacher. And after interviewing many teachers, we kind of boil it down into this very concise user stories. So as a teacher, I want to set up and manage my classroom for success. That is, configure things ahead of time and have very minimal management during the class. That way I can focus most of the time on engagement and assessment. As a teacher, I want to establish presence and trust with and between students. It's really important for students to feel comfortable to engage online, and engagement, because learning occurs when you actually apply yourself, make mistakes, learn from them. And you have to feel comfortable doing that. You have to trust the students and teacher to do that. And certainly when you're in breakout rooms, you have to trust everybody it's okay to not know the answers and to make mistakes. The struggle is a key part of learning. Engagement, as a teacher, I want to effectively engage and activate their minds for learning. This is not engage them to hold their attention. This is activate their minds, which is mean get them to think, apply, struggle, learn. It's through that process that our brain rewires. It's just simply how our brain works. If we're not computers, you can't watch 4 hours of basic Spanish and then walk out on the street and start speaking basic Spanish. That's just not how our brains work. And I'll talk a bit more about the brain science about learning in a few moments. The 4th element is assessment. You need to be able to assess progress and give timely feedback. And of course that makes sense, but if you look at it from the point of view of the students, it's really important. So if we look at these 4 aspects of an effective virtual class from the point of view of the student, it simplifies a bit. Students don't really worry about management. That's the responsibility of the teacher. Student wants to feel comfortable to participate. That's through the presence, the trust. The student's goal is to efficiently master new skills. And I think of this in terms of a difference between want and need. A student may want to watch, so if you're a teacher and you give a virtual class for 1 hour, a student may want to watch the recording of your class at 1.5 times speed, maybe while they're looking at TikTok, but that's not going to be learning. It's the same reason why we can't watch 4 hours of basic Spanish. The student needs to be applying themselves in your class, struggling, rewiring their neurons, learning, and ideally receiving help when I'm struggling. If a student in a virtual class receives help, it tells them that the teacher is aware of them, cares about them, and takes time to give them help. That's the job of the teacher, but from the point of view of the student, it significantly increases the value of the online class and their reason to participate. Okay, so if we just did features in a virtual classroom with no looking at the learning theory, I would argue that you're not going to build an effective virtual classroom. But if you look at the theory of how our brains work, which is well studied for teaching and learning, and you apply that to the virtual classroom, you're going to have a more effective experience. So I want to ask a second question. Has anybody here read this book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain? Just type in the chat if you've read it. Okay. This book can teach anyone how to draw. And it does it by doing 2 things. One is it breaks down drawing into 5 fundamental components that if you master each of those components, you have mastered the skills of drawing. And the second, it was based on brain theory where drawing occurs on the right side of our brain, not the dominant left side. And if you use some techniques to bypass the dominant left side and get to the right side, and you master those components, you can draw. Anyone can draw. So in the absence of knowing how the brain works, it's really hard to draw. This is why we all draw stick people when we look at somebody. So brain science is very important. Cool, Cheryl. So for the virtual classroom, 4 fundamental components: management, relationship, engagement, assessment. And in terms of like brain theory or learning theory, I'll just give the high levels. Our brain works like a muscle. We're not computers. That's why we can't watch 4 hours of basic Spanish. We have short-term and long-term memory. and it takes effort to move things into long term. And our brains work generally in two ways, and we'll just call it stage one, stage two. Stage one is just automatic. You can go into a car, if you drive, you can go into a car, turn the keys, and you don't even think about it. It's all happening automatically. If I asked you what 2 + 2 is, you would just respond immediately 4. But if I asked you what 137 + 256 is, you could probably do it in your head, but you have to stop and think about it. That's stage two. That's the higher order thinking, and your brain is working and firing the neurons, and in some cases rewiring them. If I asked you many times to give me the addition of 3-digit numbers, you would get better at it after a while. That's like the muscle. As you learn, your knowledge is built in hierarchies. So from a teacher's point of view, this is obvious. If you want to teach something new, you root it in the foundations of what they already know, and you make sure those foundations are solid. In terms of learning, we learn most effectively with and from others. This is also why we just don't, if we want to learn something, we just don't read a book for a 400-page book and we're done. We need to learn from others. This is the foundation of Moodle, social constructivism. And we learn in stages. And there's theories about like the stages that we learn, but I'll pick the popular one, Bloom's taxonomy. So what does Bloom's taxonomy say? And I'll use the example given in Wikipedia. There are 6 stages where we go through learning, and you have to build on each one. So if you were going to learn about apples, you would need to remember what an apple is. You would need to understand the difference between, say, a Granny Smith and a Macintosh apple. Third, you need to be able to apply. So let's say you're given a recipe about how to bake an apple pie. You need to be able to bake the pie. When the pie comes out of the oven, you need to be able to look at it and analyze it, measure it, the color of the pie, the taste of the pie, and then you need to evaluate whether this was a good pie or not. Did the pie, was this a successful pie? And then the 6 would be mastery. Can you create your own apple pie recipe? If you stare at this long enough, you'll notice they're kind of grouped into three areas. The first area is really about memorization. You don't have to know anything about apples just to memorize the different types of apples. That's moving information from your short term to long term. The next 3 is really applied learning. You're trying to do something with the knowledge you have. It could be solve a problem related to like how tall a tree is by taking the angle of it and using some basic trigonometry, bake a pie, and so on. The last stage is the creativity, which is you take what you've learned and you apply with some creativity, and then you achieve mastery. That's where the teachers want to get to. But there's no shortcuts. This is just the way our brains work. We have to go through the phases before we can get to mastery. Okay. And I did put a slide in here in terms of social constructivism, but this is taken right from Moodle. This is the foundation of what Martin Dugamis would give as 5 precepts of social constructivism. The interesting one, a learning environment needs to be flexible and adaptable so it can quickly respond to the needs of participants within it. Sounds like this is really like very much possible in a virtual classroom. Okay, so what does this tell us about the role of the virtual classroom? Well, if you think about it, the most effective virtual class is where you can spend the most of the time getting students to apply themselves in learning something, making mistakes, solving problems, working each other, and then the teacher assessing their progress and giving feedback. So you really want to be spending the most time you can at the upper stages of Bloom's taxonomy. It would be a very boring class if the teacher just talked for an hour and just tried to drill into the heads things that are related to remembering and understanding. Students would not find much value in their class, and they would probably just want to watch it at 1.5 times speed. Okay, so looking at it another way, the use cases are really driving towards maximizing the time that you can effectively engage students and activate their minds for learning, and that the students receive feedback and help. So the feedback enables them to be more effective, and eventually the student can efficiently master new skills. All right, there's one more component of an effective virtual classroom, and that's the structure of it. So a class is not just 60 minutes of a teacher talking. Again, that's not an effective way because the students aren't really engaging themselves. Maybe a little bit, but what you really want to do is set up the class so that you can maximize the time for engagement. And what we would suggest is you break it into 4 phases. There is a social phase at first. This should make perfect sense to anyone's taught. There's a social part at the beginning of the class where people are mingling or getting to know each other. You would want to build some of that time into your virtual class. This is where video may be helpful, breakout rooms and so on, but you want to make sure that students have had a chance to connect with people, with each other and the teacher on some social level so that they build up trust. The teacher then does the introduction, and there's two parts to this. One is you review material that you've gone through before. This is coming back to that we learn in hierarchies. Our knowledge is based in hierarchies. And then you want to make sure the foundation you're building on is solid. And then the second part of the introduction would be is you would talk about what is going to be covered in the class today. You would cover the material, we'll talk about that in a moment, and you would summarize. The summary should be given from the students, not the teacher. Again, this goes back to learning theory. If you are a teacher and you ask the students, what were the main points that I talked about during the class? You are asking them to recall what they thought was the main points. This is the stage 2 thinking, and they're wiring the neurons in their brain. They're thinking about what happened in the class, and they're trying to judge what happened and come back to you. And that effort is like the muscle. It's like doing an exercise to strengthen the knowledge. If you just told them what the summary was at the end, there's no active learning. It's basically passive at that point. Okay, in the main segment, the theory suggests that you should teach some content, and what you want to do is engage and assess them as much as you can. And that's where the real learning occurs. So the more time that you make available for engagement and assessment, the more learning that will occur. So over classes, what you ideally want to do is, of course, in the first class, you're teaching lots of new content. You want to build up a rhythm where you can maximize the time or increase the time for engagement as the class goes on. And if you think about the structure of a class, it has a before part and after part. Well, that's in Moodle. So if I take an example where, let's say it's the first class of the term, there would be a syllabus. And what you would ideally want to do as a teacher is that you would record some content ahead of the first class that would cover off the knowledge that you want them to remember and understand. That way, they can review that, have that knowledge ready, and then you can use that to apply during the class. Again, the goal is to maximize the time where they can apply their knowledge and go through those higher stages of Bloom taxonomy. At the end, there would be key takeaways, get them to do it, and then, of course, there's a class recording where they can review, again, exercising the muscle. And as the classes go on, you can see there's a bit of a rhythm. You have a small video ahead of time to just cover the content that could be understood or remembered or understood. You have the key takeaways that become the review of the next class to make sure the foundation is solid. And then you continue on and build up more and more for content and engagement. Okay, with that in mind, we can now talk about how you can use BigBlueButton to deliver effective virtual classroom within that framework. So let's break it down into the 4 pieces. On the management side, because BigBlueButton is built into Moodle, it tries to make use of full capabilities for Moodle for setting up your class ahead of time. Things that you can do in BigBlueButton in Moodle is like preset the lock settings, set up the default slides, map user roles. Maybe you want to create a session where all students are teachers or have moderator roles so that they can interact and use it. And maybe you want to prevent the students from entering in the class until you as the teacher or the educator are present. So there's lots of things you can do to set up ahead of time. And you can also manage the recordings as well in Moodle. There's no external login with BigBlueButton. It's just, we like to say we built it with the goal of making it feel like part of Moodle. And with Moodle 4.0, it actually is part of Moodle. So in that regard, we succeeded. And in doing that, we open the door for a lot tighter integration that we can do with other products that you may be able to achieve with other products. And I'll talk about that integration and analytics in a moment. 2, relationships. So this is where webcams are important. So this is one of the meetings that we use for BigBlueButton. Here we are sharing, looks like 17 webcams. So you can use webcams for sharing content or for the relationship. BigBlueButton will highlight the current talker. It will tell you who's currently talking. And you can do things like pinning a webcam or maybe putting students in breakout rooms with icebreaker activities. The third foundation of a successful and effective virtual class is engagement. And this is where your goal is to engage students to activate their brains, get them doing something. And BigBlueButton gives you many ways to engage. I'll highlight a few of them. So raise hands, you can raise hands, and it's set up so that the teacher cannot ignore or cannot miss who has raised a hand, and you'll see the students' hands raised in the order that they did. Students can have emojis, so they can choose an emoji, and whenever they apply an emoji to their avatar, it goes to the top, so the teacher could see which emojis are in place. it's a way to ask students, are you happy, sad? Again, another form of engagement. There's multi-user whiteboard, which in BigBlueButton allows you to turn off, allows you to have each student move their mouse around, and they can draw as well. But if you think of moving the mouse around, you can point at the screen. So if the teacher puts something up that can be a formative assessment, like point at the screen and show me where Spain is. What we allow you to do in BigBlueButton is not only can students do multi-user whiteboard, but you can turn off the students' ability to see each other's cursor, but you as a teacher see it. So now you have a scenario where you can put some content up, a graph, a diagram of the heart, a map of the world, and start asking students formative questions. Point at me where Spain is. You'll see where everyone's pointing, but the students can't see each other. So there's many ways that you can use BigBlueButton in this way for doing sort of graphical type of assessments or visual assessment. And there are templates as well that you can use. In the course that was published earlier this week in Moodle Academy on delivering effective virtual classrooms using BigBlueButton, that course actually has a link to a teacher who has very helpfully shared many of their ways to do visual assessment. Polling is built into BigBlueButton. We make it very easy. We want to make it so that you can click a button or two and do a true-false poll, ABCD, or even get the users to respond. You can do shared notes as well. So this is a shared collaborative area. So if you wanted to ask students to do what are the key takeaways for the class, you can have them type it in the shared notes, and multiple people can be typing at the same time. And BigBlueButton gives you control for management. So you can restrict it so that only, if you want, only you type in the shared notes. There's some fun things like you can select a user, a random user. And of course, we have breakout rooms. You can do up to 24 breakout rooms. You can drag and drop students in them or allow the students to enter breakout rooms themselves. One thing we do is we call smart slides. So we want to make it easy for the teacher to engage students. If you have slides that you upload, you can use the whiteboard, draw all over them. You can zoom in and out. And you can also, because BigBlueButton reads the text into memory for screen readers, it can detect whether the slide has what looks like a polling type question. So in this case, it's like, what are the rings of Saturn made of? ABCD. BigBlueButton says, hey, I think you have a poll here. If you click this button, I will just start this poll for you. So imagine as a teacher, you can put in formative assessment in your material by just simply formatting it like a question with some choices, and BigBlueButton will let you do the polls with one click. So I had some examples here, like if you did Einstein invent the atom, there would be a true-false button. What are the rings of Saturn made of? ABCD. Who ran the first 4-minute mile? These were examples of how you could do formative assessment, and there would just be one button to do the click. Number 4 is assessment. You may be familiar with some products that give you a report after the class is over on who participated and maybe some of their activities. But think of that for a moment. As a teacher, what you really want to do is understand who is struggling in the class live during the class. So the way we do in BigBlueButton, we provide you what we call the Learning Analytics Dashboard. It is a live dashboard that will open up into another window. If you have 2 monitors, that's great because you can have that always visible. It will update every 10 seconds, and it will tell you 3 things: who is in my class, who is active, and who is learning based on responses to polls. We like to think of it as there should be no back of the classroom. By making this data visible to the teacher live during the class, they can see maybe who is struggling by not answering any polls or who has not engaged with the class, like has not chatted, spoken, raised their hand, talked, used an emoji. And I have to say, that might be fine. This is entirely dependent on the context of your teaching. But if your goal is to engage students, and the theory of learning says the more you engage them and activate their brains for learning, the more you're actually helping them learn, then if there is a student in your class that's actually not participating, you as a teacher, you don't have to struggle to figure that out. We'll tell you exactly who is engaged or not. And think of that in contrast where if you're trying to teach and all you had was webcams, your brain will be constantly trying to look at these thumbnails to see, who is working or who's engaged with me. If you do that, if you engage them in the classroom live, the data is there, and we will show you the data to help you teach. Think of it like your co-pilot. We'll give you the data to decide where you want to take the class. So examples of what the Learning Analytics Dashboard can do is we have a timeline view. So if you upload slides, you're annotating them, you're going through slides, and you kind of think, all right, I'm halfway through my slides, and I knew there was a slide that students had raised their hands about, You don't have to struggle to remember it. We'll just tell you. We have a timeline view and we'll show you exactly when students raise their hands. And you can also click on any student's name. We have this activity score out of 10. We'll tell you exactly how we computed the activity score, which is like a relative score. So the student that spoke the most would get the highest points, like 2 points out of 2 out of 2. Everyone else gets a percentage thereafter. This is not meant for a grading or a grading. It is meant to give you a sense of who is in your class, who is active or participating, and who is learning based on responses to polls. And again, if your goal is to engage them, what you're looking for is outliers. Are there students here that have done nothing? And in that case, those students may warrant some attention where you could say, hey, it's really important to, we really want everyone to be involved. Or you can, depending on the relationship with the student, maybe address them directly. The point is that the student would be aware that you are aware of them, know about them, and care about them. With the Moodle integration, we actually get some of that data back from the Learning Analytics dashboard back into Moodle. But you have to set this up. It's turned off by default. And have to make sure that there's no firewall preventing the data from going back. But you can use activity completion in Moodle to say that I would like this activity to be marked when students have attended a class for more than 90 minutes. And maybe that, and also have responded to polls. This way allows Moodle to automatically mark it. And as I said a moment ago, you have to enable this and you have to test it to make sure that the BigBlueButton server can send the data back to Moodle. And I know that they're in the latest version of Moodle 4.02, they're working on a few edge cases for it. So if you do use this, just make sure you test it ahead of time. But this is an example of where the deep integration with Moodle and BigBlueButton pays off. The SUSE system should share data back and forth. If you think about a student's activity in your class, it can break down into two parts. One is in Moodle, and the other is in your live class. And you shouldn't have to go to two different places to see these reports. So while activity completion is a first step, our goal is to give you what we'll call unified reports. You should be able to see a unified view of your students' activity across the LMS and in the virtual classroom. And with integration from Moodle, that now becomes possible for us. So while we may not have that today, I want to point out that if the four pillars are, one of the four pillars is assessment, we have the ability to provide you increasingly visibility into what's going on in the class and unify that with data in Moodle so that you can get unified reports. That's our goal for the future. All right, I want to summarize. So at the BigBlueButton project, we are focused on creating the next generation of virtual classrooms that is deeply integrated with Moodle. And when you think about, I spoke about the next generation of what plans we have at our BigBlueButton World Conference last week. I'll just give you a verbal of two of them. If you think about breakout rooms, it would be really helpful to know what students are doing in the breakout rooms, like which rooms are active or not. We're working on that. We'll call it breakout vision. Should be sometime next year. And if you want to do formative assessment and you want students to work on something, another way of thinking about it is if you give them a task, let's say figure out a math problem or a science problem, and you want them to be working on the whiteboard, give them the ability to do that individually, but you as a teacher should be able to see all the whiteboards live. And then for any student that's struggling, you should be able to connect with that student one-on-one. So think of like a cone of silence. And all that whiteboard activity should be available to you during the Learning Analytics live during the class and the Learning Analytics dashboard, and it should go back to Moodle afterwards. That's some of the capabilities that we're working on. And again, it's all driven by the use cases of what the teacher and the student are trying to achieve, by the learning theory behind teaching and learning, and also the structure of an effective class. That's how we come to a place where we are focused on online learning, and we are focused on making sure that Moodle has the world's best virtual classroom. And with that, I welcome any feedback you have or any questions that you'd like to give in the chat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frederick Dixon. I believe we have many educators with us today, so your presentation was definitely very helpful. So with that, let us now open the Q&A. So do we have questions? Do we have questions, everyone?
This wasn't as engaging as I usually give this with BigBlueButton, so I do much more engagement because I'm using BigBlueButton to talk about BigBlueButton. So aside from me asking you things in the chat, you weren't really engaged. But if you want to engage now and ask me questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, so okay, so we have a feedback here, sir, from Professor Ray Medinilla. Thank you, Fred. So nice. So I'm willing to try.
That's good. We found that because we focused on online learning, this is the market which we're in. We're not trying to make a business conferencing system. We're trying to make a virtual classroom. I didn't have slides on it, but I'll give you 2 examples of that focus and where the adoption. So Germany, which is very vigilant on digital student privacy and digital sovereignty, they used BigBlueButton very heavily and continue to use it. At the height of the pandemic, one of the states, Baden-Württemberg, they set up BigBlueButton servers to enable 3,000 Moodle schools to simultaneously teach online, and they peaked at 185,000 concurrent teachers and students. That was all using BigBlueButton and Moodle, all open source. I didn't even know about that until after they had done it. The second example I'll give you is that the French Ministry of Education, the country of France, is very heavily invested in deploying BigBlueButton. We work with them as well, and they are funding some of the development of BigBlueButton for the benefit of everybody. They too believe that the way to achieve the most effective tools in education is to do it not through proprietary, and there's nothing wrong with proprietary products, but I think we could all agree that Moodle's success would not have been achieved if it was a proprietary product. The success was achieved by building a commonwealth of teachers, educators, developers, and companies all around the world that saw the value of improving the product for the benefit of everybody. We've been at BigBlueButton for 14 years, and we are 100% focused on teaching online, and the pandemic was quite an inflection point for us. The results that we see at the French Ministry of Education, in Germany, and around the world convince us that we're on the right track. And sharing what we've done here in terms of how we are thinking about teaching and learning from a theory point of view, like we think of it as applied theory, we think we have a very strong path ahead to deliver on the promise of building the next generation of virtual classrooms. So all to say is, if you want to try out BigBlueButton, that's really great to hear. I will let you judge if we are doing our job in terms of providing you the tools to engage students online, and that we are receptive and listening to what teachers are looking to do and how they can most effectively engage with students.
We have 2 questions, sir. First is, are all these features available in all Moodle versions?
3.11 and above should be all you need. I mean, if you should be running like the latest version of Moodle 3, I would be surprised if anybody was too far behind. And in terms of the course that I'm teaching, the course that I created with a number of teachers around the world, it's actually now live at Moodle Academy. So it was published earlier this week, and you can find the course on delivering effective virtual classes using BigBlueButton. But as you can see here, it's not just we really didn't want to do something that says, here are features, go figure them out. That is what we see in the market. Not as helpful as we think with teachers. What we try to do is meet the teachers where they are, understand what they're trying to do, and again, apply the theory so that it shapes us to building a most effective virtual classroom. So if you want to see the more details of what I shared here in terms of delivering effective virtual classes, it's actually public on Moodle Academy. Anybody in the world can go enroll in the course, take it, and you'll get a badge at the end of it, which is kind of cool. But yeah, we work closely with Moodle to create the course.
Another question, sir. How can schools subscribe to BBB premium hosting?
So if I may put my Blindside Networks hat on, you can certainly contact us. And I believe the host for the conference here, Napalia Webb, I'm not getting that name correct, the host company for it, I believe they can also offer you premium tier hosting as well. Blindside Networks provides hosting. BigBlueButton is open source, and you have agency. A school can set up their own BigBlueButton server if they want. They can set up a pool of BigBlueButton servers if they want. There are a number of companies in the BigBlueButton ecosystem that invest most of the revenue back into development of BigBlueButton, and Blindside Networks is one. So if you want to learn more, I would recommend contacting your Moodle hosting provider. And the Moodle partner is a good chance we already have a relationship with them. And the revenue that we earn from that, you would know goes back into improving BigBlueButton for everybody.
Okay, sir, another question from Professor Ray S. Medanilla from the University of Makati. I have heard about the tool, except that our LMS didn't have it. But does it come with free learning contents?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. I mean, if you're looking for a free version of BigBlueButton, probably the best way is you can set up, the question would be is like, where can you find a free version of Moodle? And I think the answer for Moodle would be is, well, Moodle is open source. You are more than welcome to set up your own Moodle server and just use it as much as you want. I mean, so there's, as open source, there's some skills, like you have to be able to set up the software, administrate it, and so on, but nothing prevents you from doing that. The software grants you the rights. You could go to Moodle Cloud and set up a free account. BigBlueButton is integrated with that. If you are getting your Moodle from a Moodle hosting provider or a Moodle partner, there's a good chance that they can offer you some solutions for BigBlueButton. And you can always reach out to us as well. But if your school does not provide you access to BigBlueButton, the step would be is to convince them that it's worthwhile to enable BigBlueButton inside. And then the hosting of it, there are many choices as I just covered.
We have another feedback, sir, here from Miss Jennifer Pahe from Elizabeth Seton School. Appreciate the topic. I believe this is good help. Thank you, Fred. Kudos.
Thank you. It was quite fun to create this course. Having been doing virtual classes for 14 years, we learned a lot along the way. And with working with Moodle, it gave us a chance to how to put some of that learning into a course format so that we could make it available to anyone in the world. So it actually turned out pretty good. And of course, there's no cost to enroll in the course, and there's a discussion group associated with the course. So I'm looking forward to interacting with teachers, more teachers around the world, and just continue to improve the course as we improve Moodle. And again, this is for the benefit of everybody.
Okay, so do we have other questions? I believe there are none. So once again, thank you. Thank you very much, Sir Frederick Dixon. And thank you to Blindside Networks for being our pro sponsor and the key partner in making this event a success.
Our pleasure. Thank you for having us. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference.
But sorry, sir, there is another question here. Yes, for a while, sir. Where is the course? Is there a link?
Yep, I pasted. Oh, maybe I didn't paste it in. Hang on. There. Oh, why is that not? Oh, I think I'm trying to do a direct message. Hang on, everyone in the meeting. There we go. Moodle Academy.
Okay.
That's, you can go there and you can enroll in the course. And again, it's free.
For those interested, you can take a look at the link posted by Sir Fred Dixon on the chat box. So once again, thank you very much, Mr. Frederick Dixon.
My pleasure. Enjoy the conference.